Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the Harborne Islamic Study Circle HISC Seerah session 207. And just carrying on with the Year of Delegations, this is the 9th year of the Hijra, and a quick recap on what we did last week. So we talked about a couple of tribes, Bani Haneefa ibn Bakr, who were the sub-tribe of the Khawazin, the same tribe as Halima, the foster mother of the Prophet ﷺ. And then one of their leaders, Yamamah ibn Uthal, he came in a very forthright, straightforward manner to the Prophet ﷺ and asked him questions about what is Islam, etc. And then upon leaving, he converted his whole tribe and destroyed the idols on the same day. So a lot of blessings from the Imam of Bani Haneefa ibn Bakr. And then we also talked about the Banu Thaqif, or the tribe of Taif, and we talked about one of their chiefs who we've talked about before, Urwa ibn Masud al-Thaqafi, who was one of the negotiators in Hudaybiyah. He became a Muslim shortly after the battle of he became a Muslim shortly after the siege of Taif, when Taif didn't fall, but he converted. Then he became a Muslim, and then the Prophet said, emigrate to Medina, but he said, no, my people love me. And then he got a rough reception when he told them he was a Muslim, and then he was doing the adhan for Fajr on his rooftop, and when he was killed by an arrow. And then later on, a delegation came from Taif to the Prophet ﷺ's mosque in Medina to try and negotiate what to do. And they tried to get some compromise from the Prophet ﷺ around interest, around riba, around fornication and zina, around alcohol, around idol worshipping, prayer or wudu. And Prophet ﷺ said no to all of those things. Prophet ﷺ appointed Uthman ibn Abu al-As as their sort of chief. And then we talked about the story about Zuhair ibn Shu'bah, the nephew of Urwa, who played a practical joke on the people of Taif by pretending to be hurt as he's trying to destroy Allat, the chief god of Taif. And then, so just just to finish off, just to mention how the Prophet ﷺ, he was asked by Aisha what was the most difficult and saddest day for him in his dawah. And it wasn't the day of Uhud, it wasn't the day of Hawazim, it wasn't any of these days. He said the most difficult and sort of depressing day for him was the day of Taif, when he was looking for somewhere to establish as a base for Islam, because Quraish and Mecca wasn't being receptive. He went with good hope to Taif and sort of got a very rough reception himself, and then eventually was chased out and stoned out, and he was bleeding so much that his sandals were full of blood. And then he takes refuge near a vineyard, and then does dawah to somebody from Nineveh. But that was the day, and it's the same day. Obviously, we know the story where Jibreel came to the Prophet and says, "Look, if you want, I can order the angel of the mountains to crush the people of Taif the way they've treated you." And the Prophet said no to that offer, because he said, although they've treated me like that, perhaps there will be amongst their children or their children's children people who will follow Islam and praise Allah. And so here you have, within a decade of that, or just about a decade of that event, you have the people of Taif becoming Muslims and strong Muslims. So again, the power of dua and the nature of the Prophet ﷺ to be able to make dua for the people of Taif, given his experience on that day. So two stories, inshallah, today, inshallah, I want to talk about. One is Musailama al-Kadhab, the Musailama, the false prophet, the liar, and then we'll sort of finish off on a more positive note and just do one of the other stories about one of the poets, Kaab ibn Zuhair, who we've briefly mentioned before, but we'll just recap the story because it sort of happens this time in terms of the ninth year of the Hijra, or certainly after Taif. So Musailama al-Kadhab, he is from a really big tribe, northern tribe, Bani Haneefa, and we've talked about Bani Haneefa a few times. And a delegation from Bani Haneefa, they arrived in the ninth year of Al-Hijra, and there were 17 amongst them. And amongst them, there were some sincere people, but a lot of people who followed Musailama. And his full name is Musailama bin Thumamah bin Qabir bin Habib bin Harith of Banu Haneefa. And he was one of the chiefs of Banu Haneefa, and he was part of the delegation that came, and they stayed in one of the houses of the Ansar. Some of the delegation, they listened to the Prophet ﷺ and they became Muslim. Others didn't, and a small entourage around Musailama were openly hostile to the Prophet ﷺ. But we've talked about Bani Haneefa, one of the other people who converted to Islam before, from Bani Haneefa, and again this story we did in the Seerah a few months back, and this was Thumamah ibn Uthal, and he was the chap, if you can remember, that was captured surreptitiously. He was going to Mecca for Umrah, and he was one of the leaders of Bani Haneefa, but he wasn't going with all his sort of finery and entourage. He was captured, brought to Medina, and then he said, "Do you know who I am? I'm Thumamah." And the Prophet ﷺ, he tied him up to one of the pillars in the Prophet ﷺ's masjid. And the Prophet ﷺ, said, become a Muslim, and he said no. And his response each time the Prophet ﷺ invited him to Islam was, "If you kill me, you will kill someone whose blood is heavy or weighty. But if you let me go and forgive me, you will do something that is good. You'll forgive someone who is good. And if you want money, you are asking the one who has plenty." So this was the negotiation. Prophet ﷺ didn't take any of that. The next day he asked him the same question. Next day he asked him the same question. And basically Thumamah said, "Either kill me, free me, or ransom me." So the Prophet ﷺ, after 3 days, just untied Thumamah and let him go. And Thumamah left the mosque, did a ghusl, came back and became a Muslim. And then, because he didn't want to become a Muslim seemingly under duress, he wanted to show that this is of his own free will. And then he said, the Prophet encouraged him to finish his Umrah. He got to Mecca, told the people he's become a Muslim. The Quraish were very angry with him. So then, he then threatened to cut off do an economic boycott the grain and wheat that comes to Mecca. That happened, and then because of that, the people of Mecca started to starve. So they sent a delegation to the Prophet ﷺ in Medina, begging the Prophet ﷺ to rescind parts of the agreement that they had, and then Thumamah let the wheat go through when the Prophet ﷺ gave him permission in writing to do that. So that was Thumamah. So he is from Banu Haneefa. So again, you've got people in Banu Haneefa who factions within Banu Haneefa who are becoming Muslim and who are following Islam. Then you've got this chap, Musailama al-Kadhab, and the title al-Kadhab, the liar, was given to Musailama by the Prophet ﷺ. He's a grandee of the tribe of Bani Haneefa. He's quite old, probably contemporary, if not slightly older than Prophet ﷺ, in his early 60s perhaps, known to be Christian. A lot of the tribe Bani Haneefa, because they're from north, a lot of them are Christians and they have links with Christianity. This Musailama, he went to Jerusalem, studied Christianity, and sort of had all the finery of the Romans. And again, because he was an Arab, they used to look to some of the other civilizations with an inferiority complex. So they would see the Romans and their religion and the Christians, and they would try to ape them, or they would convert them. And this is what he did. So he was known to walk around sort of peacocking like a Roman, and had this sort of grandiosity about him. And then because he was studied and learned, studying for a time in Jerusalem, he had a lot of he carried a lot of weight with this tribe, and he considered himself to be one of the leaders. And then what happened is the Prophet ﷺ came along, and the Prophet ﷺ, he's claiming prophethood, and Musailama sees people ebbing away from him and becoming Muslim. So he's loving his finery and his position too much. His arrogance takes over, and he doesn't, having sort of fought hard to become sort of one of the chiefs of his tribe, having then to give that up and to follow the Prophet ﷺ, it's too much for him. And again, you see a lot of people who are like Musailama in the community, in and around, who, because of the trappings of power and wealth, they're not sincere to Islam because they love the good life too much. And he was one of these people. And again, a lot of us know the problems that were caused by Bani Haneefa. When the Prophet ﷺ died, there was the Wars of Ridda, when people became murtad or left Islam, and he was one of those people who claimed prophethood. He expected to be chief, and so you can get a sense of his arrogance and haughtiness when he is in discussions and negotiations with the Prophet ﷺ. And one of these discussions, it's recorded in the books, where Musailama is basically saying, he's giving the Prophet ﷺ an ultimatum that, Prophet ﷺ, you should give me power after you die, then I'll follow you. So if you promise me that upon your death, I will become leader of Muslims, then I will follow you, and you must share with me in prophethood like Musa shared it with his brother Harun. So you can see the arrogance that he's coming to the Prophet demanding that the Prophet splits the affairs, just as Musa and Harun split their affairs. And again, this is just so arrogant, and we'll see how the Prophet responded to that. And again, when he's meeting the Prophet ﷺ, the books of Seerah says that they started decorating him like a king. So really, dressing him up to try and psych out the Prophet ﷺ, because everyone knew the Prophet ﷺ was very simple and shunned the finery things in life. So he wanted to intimidate the Prophet ﷺ by putting on all the garbs of being a king, and then trying to look down on the Prophet ﷺ and using this approach to be quite arrogant and haughty and demanding of the Prophet ﷺ. So again, this is part of as we hear, the cut and thrust of these types of negotiations. So when he's saying this, that basically, the Musailama, he claimed that if Muhammad appoints him as a successor, he would become a Muslim. And then this was in front of somebody called Thabit bin Qais bin Shamas, and the Prophet ﷺ was talking to Musailama as he's dressed up, And he said, if you agree to transfer the whole thing to me after your death, I'm not going to stand in your way. I will let you carry on, but then I take over. So the Prophet, he's there, and he's got a piece of palm leaf in his hand. So the Prophet, he's sort of using this palm leaf or stick, and he's rubbing it in the ground, in the sand. And the Prophet replied and says, if you asked me to give you this piece of palm leaf, I would not give it to you. You are doomed, and even if you repented and stopped what you were doing, Allah appointed that you will be killed or slain. By Allah, I swear that I see you now in the very state that has been revealed to me. Here is Thabit, he will deliver you my answer from me. And the Prophet just walked off and left Musailama hanging there, because again, there's no point in talking to him. So then so people later on, like Abu Huraira recounted what that meant, and this is in Bukhari, narrated by Abu Huraira, who was asked by Ibn Abbas, that he heard the Prophet ﷺ say, once I was sleeping and I saw myself wearing 2 bracelets of gold, and obviously for a man to wear bracelets of gold, that's haram. So the Prophet ﷺ felt disturbed in his dream by this. So it was, and this is the Prophet ﷺ recounting, so it was inspired to me to blow off these gold bracelets. And then they broke off and they departed. So the Prophet ﷺ interpreted that dream to be 2 false liars after me. And the first of them will be from the tribe of Anas Talha, and the second will be Musailama from Al-Yamamah. And so, Musailama, he went back to Yamamah, thinking about, his failure, and then he started then, knowing that he's not going to get anything from the Prophet, he changed tack. So he then started to claim himself to be a prophet whilst the Prophet was alive. So he started, as I say, he just, saw how much authority the Prophet ﷺ had in Medina, and the people are flocking to him. And again, and if you remember back to when Abu Sufyan was interrogated by Heraclius, one of the questions he put Abu Sufyan there, had all his people behind him, and he's asking him about the Prophet ﷺ, about prophethood, and he goes, is prophethood known amongst you? So amongst the Arabs, is this concept of being a prophet known? Because amongst the Jews and the Christians, the people of the book, they understand the concept of prophethood. And then Abu Sufyan says, no, this is something new to us. He's the first one to claim prophethood. But now Musailama, he can see, although he's got this Christian background, he can see the benefits of claiming prophethood. He, in the lifetime of the Prophet, starts to claim he's a prophet, and then he's using that conversation that he had with the Prophet to justify his authority by saying, "Oh, I've been given half," etc., which is it's a complete lie. And then part of him trying to convince other people, he started to, Prophet has got the Qur'an, he starts to come up with some verses of poems and rhyme, and he calls it his own Qur'an. And he would get people to, bear witness that he is a real prophet. So what he would do, he would take verses of the Qur'an that he'd heard, and he would just mix words, his own words, and try to make things up and make his own version of the Quran. So he's the first person to try and make up his own Quran. There are the books of Seerah have narrated some of his attempts. He talks about a frog or a toad, and he tries to sort of change the words of Surat al-Fil, the elephant, by inserting other things, and it's just quite comical and nonsensical what he comes up with, and so much so that when there are some other people He called something the chapter of the frog after the toad, and he tried to sort of, as I say, twist the words of twist the verses of Surah Al-Kawthar by inserting different meanings. And there's a non-Arab, a non-Muslim traveler came to Musailama and says, "Look, I hear that you were a prophet. What do you have? The Muslims, the prophet in Mecca, in Medina, has the Quran. What do you have?" He goes, "Well, I've got my own Quran." And he starts to recite the things that he's come up with. And this other person says, "Wallahi, I know that you're a liar because what you're saying is utter nonsense." So that's sort of what he's trying to get people to follow him because of that. Then he then has whilst he's claiming to the Prophet, he then writes to the Prophet ﷺ and says, "I have been appointed an associate with you, and I will have half, and the Quraish will have the other half of the people's affairs because they have been negligent." So here he is, and again he's using that letter to justify his position. But so he writes this letter, sends it with a couple of envoys to the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ, he replies in his letter, "Verily, the earth is Allah's. He gives it as a heritage to whom he wills of his slaves, and the blessed end for the pious." So again, just blanking him essentially and just quoting the Quran. So then the Prophet ﷺ, he interrogates these two envoys that came, the two messengers from Musailama, and then their names are recorded as Ibn al-Nawawa and Ibn Uthal. So the Prophet asked them, "Do you bear witness that I am the Prophet?" And their reply was, "We testify that Musailama is the Prophet." Right? And so the Prophet was obviously shocked by this. And the Prophet said, "I believe in Allah and in his messenger. If I had ever thought of killing an envoy or a messenger, I would have killed you both." Right? So basically, this is reinforcing the concept that we talked about of diplomatic immunity. You don't kill the messenger who brings the news. And if we go back to before the Battle of Mu'tah, you got the Ghassanid, king killing the envoy of the Prophet ﷺ. Here, the Prophet ﷺ saying, "Look, because I obey the rules, I'm not going to do anything to you. But if I was allowed to, I would have killed you. Because this is clear kufr." So the Prophet ﷺ, he sent them back unharmed again, but laying down the law that basically we don't harm the envoys or the ambassadors, and again that's a political norm that we still have today, and it was a political norm at the time, and Prophet reinforced that through that saying. So eventually, what happened is that Musailama, he sort of gets more and more sort of crazy in his ideas and sayings, and parts of Bani Haneefa, they gravitate to the Prophet ﷺ and they give their allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ. Other parts, they are allied to Musailama. And again, it's only just over a year later that the Prophet ﷺ dies. So the Prophet ﷺ, as soon as the Prophet ﷺ died, you had a few of the tribes leaving Islam, and Bani Haneefa and the people of Yamamah, they were of those first ones to leave. And Musailama, he was the one to say, "Rally round me, and we're not going to follow the people of Medina. We're not going to accept Abu Bakr as Khalife." And there were a few other tribes, and then the first couple of years of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq's Khilafah was about consolidating the Ummah, and consolidating the rule, consolidating these people who were trying to break away, and some of them were still considered themselves Muslims, but they said, we will not pay zakah, but we'll do everything else, but we will not pay zakah. But they were still fought, because that's one of the core aspects of being a Muslim. And other people like Musailama, they would claim prophet, and you had a few other tribes. But the first few years, Abu Bakr Siddiq, he knew how important it was to consolidate the belief and what is Islam. So he was Musailama. He was killed in the Wars of Ridda, in the Battle of Yamamah, where a lot of the Muslims died, and it said amongst those a huge number of Qaris, people who'd learned the Quran. And then because of that, Umar ibn al-Khattabi came back to Abu Bakr Siddiq and said, look, we need to codify or collect the Quran, because I fear that people will, if more of these wars happen, that people will, the people who know the Quran will be killed. So we need to collect the Quran. So that's what Abu Bakr Siddiq did because of the wars of Yamamah. And Musailama, he was killed in Rabi Awal in the 12th year of Hijra, and he was killed by someone called Wahshi. Do you remember who Wahshi is? Wahshi? Zain Hassan? So Wahshi, he was the Abyssinian slave that killed Hamzah, the uncle of Prophet ﷺ, at Uhud. And remember, he was promised freedom by one of the widows, that if he was to kill Hamzah, he would be free. And so he recounts this many years later. He took his spear, and he just looked out for Hamzah, and threw the spear essentially behind, through Hamzah's back, from behind, and it pierced Hamzah, and obviously Hamzah could be seen because he had a big frame, and he was fighting off people. And so he killed Hamzah. He took the spear out and left the battlefield and was given his freedom. But then he sort of, Prophet ﷺ, he didn't banish him, but basically said, I don't want to set eyes on you again, after he was told the story of how he killed Hamzah. So Wahshi, towards the end, at the battle, during the Wars of Ridda, he gave himself a promise that he would use the same spear to kill Musailama. And he said, and that's essentially what he did. He used the same spear, and he killed Musailama al-Kadhab. And he, said that he was regretful in his life, because he said, I killed the best of men, and I killed the worst of men. And so he was killed by Wahshi. And the dream of the Prophet had the 2 gold bracelets. The other one who claimed to be a prophet, the books of Seerah say, was some called Al-Aswad al-Ansi, who was from Yemen. Again, you got people claiming prophethood, popping up left, right, and center now. He was killed by someone called Feroz, and it said that his head was cut off the night before the Prophet's death. And so when the delegates, told him, the news had already reached the Prophet through divine revelation, and the news then came the actual news came probably when Abu Bakr Siddiq was Khalife. So that's the story of Musailama, to the end, lying, and that's, why he has that title. So the next one, just to quickly finish, it's, again, we've previously talked about this, but again, just to mention it again, and this is one of the poets, Kaab bin Zuhair bin Abi Sulma. So Kaab, he was an eminent poet from a family of poets, and he was considered one of the greatest poets amongst the Arabs. And you had you had, some of the, and we talked before about how the Arabs, they loved their poetry. Al-Walid al-Mughira, he was one of the chief poets, and that's why, he was so well esteemed by the Quraish. So poetry was the currency of the elite. And the Prophet ﷺ, he had Hatham bin Thabit, and again, you would do propaganda, chief propaganda, through poetry. This was the medium of communication. You could set up some, hasten to the Prophet. He never kills. He never kills those who resort to him and are repentant. So, but if you refuse to do as I say, then it's up to you to try and save yourself by any means necessary. So the two brothers, they would correspond amongst each other, and then eventually Kaab, he felt the earth constraining around him, and so he came to Mecca. He came to Medina. He stayed in the house of someone called Juhaina as a guest, and then as he's about to leave, the chap says, "Why don't you go to the Prophet ﷺ?" And so he went to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ was never seen before, doesn't know what he looked like. He sat next to the Prophet ﷺ, put his hand in the Prophet ﷺ's hand and said, Kaab bin Zuhair has heard that if you forgive him, he'll accept Islam, basically. So the Prophet said, yes, tell him that if he wants to repent, then I will accept his forgiveness. Fetch him over here. I'll speak to him. And then Kaab said, well, I am Kaab bin Zuhair. And as soon as he said that, one of the Ansar, he leapt up and said, let me, cut his throat. Let me kill him here and now. Prophet says, no, leave him alone. He's become repentant. He's become a Muslim after whatever he's done in the past. And so Kaab, he recites a very eloquent poem about the Prophet ﷺ, and we talked about it before. It's called Su'ad the Prophet ﷺ, and he praises the Prophet ﷺ. He apologizes for his past errors. He acknowledges the Prophet ﷺ as a prophet, and he praises both the Ansar and the Muhajir. So that's the story of Kaab, who became Muslim around about this time. So inshallah, we'll finish there then. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. وَلَسَرْ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. جزاك الله خير.